Hello, and welcome to Know Your Community. I am State Representative Brenda Carter, serving Michigan House District 29. House District 29 includes the communities of Auburn Hills, Pontiac, Keego Harbor, Sylvan Lake, and Orchard Lake Village. Joining me today is community activist Kenny Anderson. Mr. Anderson has been working to increase preventative health within the African American community, as well as reducing racial disparities in healthcare services. Kenny, thank you for taking the time to come on my show.
All right, thank you too for inviting me.
Kenny, tell me a little bit about you, a little bit about the person Kenny Anderson, and what led you to take the charge of exposing and identifying ways we can mitigate minority health issues.
Well, Kenny Anderson is a Pontiac resident. Kenny Anderson is a father. Kenny Anderson occupationally was a social worker for over 30 years, and Kenny Anderson has been a community leader in Pontiac since 1979, and that's been for 40 years. I started when I was 22 years of age. I got involved in really black people's health condition because, to be honest and very frank with you, Rep. Carter, is that I got tired of seeing our folks dying. I mean, Pontiac is a small community, and just every day seeing funeral hearses around. And so it kind of prompted me to really take a look at health. Not only at the time when I got involved, black-on-black male violence was at a real high, but I began to really look beyond just the homicides and began to really pay attention to the causes of death within the black community. And the causes of death were very alarming, from heart disease to strokes to cancer to unintentional accidents, diabetes. So I started to push more of my message from really black-on-black male violence to black health in general. In 1988, I had read an article that Michigan released their first report on minority health and reducing racial health disparities. So what I did was I contacted the state, the Michigan Department of Community Health. I told them that I wanted to become involved. They sent me 300 copies of the report. I got out in the community and distributed those reports to churches, to individuals in general, as that my first initial entree into trying to reduce racial health disparities within the African American community.
And Kenny, I know that's very, very important in our community. You mentioned the community of Pontiac, and when I did a basic study on it, I took a look of it. And first of all, I want to thank you for bringing this to my attention, PA 653, and its impact on Pontiac. But when I did my study on it, I saw the Michigan average for heart disease, strokes, heart attacks, and I found the community of Pontiac, a very little small community in Michigan, was above average in all of these categories. I mean, above the Michigan average. And what factors, environmental factors, do you think contribute specifically in urban communities to increase the incidence of heart disease, strokes, and diabetes?
First of all, we have to look at the social detriments, those environmental factors that are detrimental to African American health. And we have to begin by really addressing racism. Racism is an overarching factor that produces a lot of stress within the African American community. You're talking about racism affects poverty, it affects unemployment. When you're talking about other detriments within the community, you're talking about health illiteracy. You're talking about other cultural factors in our community that gives rise to a sense of poor health. Because one of the things that I attempt to do to stress to African Americans is this: health is really all that we have. I mean, health is important. I think at times we don't understand the importance of health. That realistically, if you and I were to die, and I use this example all the time, if we were to die, all the money in the world can bring us back to life. So our lives are very priceless, and we don't really understand that. And then there's the cultural detriments of health, what African Americans do on our part internally. One major factor is the fact that oftentimes African Americans prayer is important, but we have to look at prayer in context. Is that a lot of African Americans pray and they use prayer to overcome bad health practices. So we pray, but we don't exercise too. Also within our communities is that we've accepted a culture of being big. I understand the whole reality of body shaming, but at the same time is that we have to be honest about obesity. And right now, the latest data that I've seen is that 70% of African American women are either overweight or obese. And obesity is the mother to many of the chronic diseases like heart disease, hypertension, stroke, and diabetes. So those factors within our communities, we have to do a much better job in critiquing what we do.
And Kitty, you brought up so many very important points there. I know you spoke at the Pontiac City Council one time very emphatically and passionately pleading to the African American community, particularly women of color, about obesity. Now, and you also you just pointed to the fact that this may have been a derivative of being enslaved. So what can we do as a community to, first of all, because I'm going to dig a little deeper in this as time allows, but what can we do as a community to address the mothering of our children as we begin to teach them that fatback and greens and ham hocks is delicious, but in long term it will become detrimental? What would you say is a way of outreach that we can begin programming our youngsters or our families about nutritious eating?
The first of all, I think part of health promotions in communities that we have to come up with some health slogans. And one of the things that we have to teach our whole community is that we got to love our bodies. That's the first thing we got to, because see, we have to have an overarching philosophy to drive what we do. We have to change thinking and we have to change values. So the first thing we got to do, we have to have slogans to begin to change our value system. And once we start to influence the value system, then we'll start to see some behavioral change. Because what most people don't understand is most chronic diseases are a result of lifestyles. In our communities, if we change our lifestyle, we could put a major dent in reducing chronic diseases. And another thing that we have to put out is that, unfortunately, we believe healthcare is doctors and a Blue Cross card. No, healthcare is you. See, generally when you go to a doctor, you're going to a doctor because you're sick. And primarily, you're talking about the tertiary end of health, which is like when you're in trouble, per se. We have to teach our folks and stress to our folks, first and foremost, we are health care.
Yeah.
We are the primary preventers. We have to take ownership of our own life. So I think once we begin to change our folks cognitively and the way that they think, bombarding them with slogans and stuff, we'll begin to see them change. We'll begin to see more fitness centers in our communities. Because let's just be honest. When you go to cities like Bloomfield and Birmingham, they have yoga studios, they have Pilates, they have Tai Chi, they have all different types of fitness centers. And in our community, we may have 1 or 2 fitness centers. So we have to really change that paradigm. We have to change the paradigm in our community from a sick culture and a cemetery culture to a healthy culture.
Wow, that was powerful what you just said. Changing from a sick culture and a cemetery culture to a health conscious culture. You were saying so many things that are impactful that I just want to just go back and grab them and bring them to the forefront, the need to provide our community with an environment of health, some walking paths, maybe mitigating some of those or reducing some of those fast food restaurants, and no disrespect to them, and I know a lot of fast food restaurants are beginning to enter more health conscious meals on there, but when you cut on your television and you see sugar just dripping down a stack of pancakes, if you're diabetic, that's a death sentence.
But you know, the businesses are going to be businesses. And they're going to do their thing and they're going to advertise. But at the same time, the community has to do its thing. And it's nothing wrong with fast foods sometimes, but we have to counter that, especially you had mentioned mothers. To be honest, the younger group of mothers, a lot of them don't know how to cook. We have to teach cooking classes. The older sisters in our community have to teach cooking classes. We have to use our churches more to educate our people around health. I know pastors do a good job twice a year with health fairs, but to be honest, our health situation is such crisis that we have to do much more. And one of the things also you mentioned, like walking, one of the things that we all can do in our communities is I had developed a slogan, let's walk together. That the community, to me, the most healthy thing that we can do, that we should be able to unite on this walk.
Absolutely. And see, you're leading into an area that I really would love to have with your degree of expertise. And how many years have you been doing this on the forefront of this battle?
I've been involved in Black community health prevention since 1988, so that's 31 years.
That is awesome. I need to know from you, Kenny, and this is very important. In your opinion, what can the leadership, the elected officials, you mentioned our church organizations, what are our educational institutions, what can we do to start bringing this crisis to the forefront and get them to join in on developing healthy practices in our community?
First of all, right now you're a shining model, so hopefully they can take the cue and the lead from you. By you taking this struggle up to improve our health, inviting me on the show, and I've talked to you off camera and all the work that you're doing behind scenes, you're an example of what mayors should do on a local level, pastors should do, council members, to do as much as you all can on a policy level to change policies, on a more macro level. And folks like myself, we got to do even more on a micro level. Pastors have to do much more. I've been talking to pastors, and one of the problems with pastors, they're just stuck on health fairs once or twice a year. And what I always explain to them is that we have to do much more. With this problem, we need to be at this every day. So to me, I recommend that all churches start a health ministry.
Oh,
I recommend that all churches have at least a health room or at least a health table with information that can educate our people about chronic diseases. In my work, I find out the overwhelming majority of our folks don't even understand the diseases that they have.
isn't that
How
something?
can you really get better if you don't understand what diabetes is? How can you get better if you don't understand symptoms? Because, see, one of the things is that a lot of black folks actually, especially in the area of heart disease, are dying from heart attacks because they don't even understand simple symptoms. Like oftentimes one of the major symptoms of a heart attack is having a stomach ache. We believe we just got indigestion, may have ate the wrong food, and we take a Rolade.
Well, Kenny, all this information is very important. I just want, this is for me, personal request. What are the symptoms of a heart attack? And briefly, if a person is experiencing what should they do?
Well, when you start talking about heart attack symptoms, I just highlighted one is that sometimes you feel like you have a stomach ache, your stomach feels queasy. Oftentimes with heart attacks on the left side, you may have a little nagging pain in your jaw, in your neck, and in your shoulders. At times you can feel dizzy, a lot of dizziness, or just really feel tired. And what happens is that we kind of diminish those symptoms because we really don't understand them. So again, like I said, we'll take a Rolade, for indigestion, when in fact, oftentimes that's a major indication we might be experiencing some serious heart problems. Oftentimes we have problems in our shoulders and our neck, we feel achy. So what we feel is, maybe I might have a little arthritis, I got a little tension, maybe I need a massage, and we just kind of ignore those things. And those things are very major.
Thank you, Kenny, for being such a tireless advocate for our community and sharing your expertise with us today. For more information on preventative health and reducing racial health disparities, please contact my office at 517-373-0475. This is Know Your Community, and I'm State Representative Brenda Carter. After the break, Jermaine Max Main Branner is the CEO and owner of our local Anytime Fitness. He will join us to talk about health and wellness.
It takes less than 1 minute to find out if you may have prediabetes. You can do it here. But I get it, you're busy, and busy people can't have prediabetes. I read that wrong. They can, okay? Just go to the site.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. Welcome back to Know Your Community. I'm State Representative Brenda Carter, serving House District 29. My next guest is Jermaine Max Main Branner, CEO and owner of our local Anytime Fitness. Welcome, Max Main.
Thanks for having me.
You know, tell me just a little bit about Jermaine and what was your, why did you go into fitness?
The way that I walked into fitness, it's an unusual story. My mother wasn't a nurse, or I didn't grow up eating healthy, or I didn't know anything about health. Actually, bad eating led to bad actions, which landed me up in prison, actually.
Wow.
And just to give you, a deeper story, I grew up in Section 8 housing, where it was occupied by 100% of single mothers, where the only time that we really ate food from scratch was maybe Sunday after church when grandma cooked it. And just to go back and, go back a little deeper, I remember, when in prison, I had the worst headache probably in the history of the world one day. So I went to the doctor, and after the doctor checked my blood pressure and everything, he was like, "Oh my God, I'm surprised you're lucky you're still alive. Take this water, this little small pill, and you should go and work out." So I remember going to lay down. I had my covers over my head, and then another guy, I think he thought I was maybe depressed or crying. He was like, "Man, come outside and come work out, man, so you can feel better." So I remember the doctor saying, "Go work out," and I'm listening to this marching band in my head, so I'm like, I gotta get rid of this headache. I'm not really thinking about the high blood pressure, I'm thinking about the symptoms. Mm-hmm. And about 2 weeks later, after working out, drinking water, and eating all the vegetables that I can find, I just decided to keep going.
Okay.
And I also thought about, my two best friends, which is my father and my brother that have hypertension, so I started sharing information with them. And my grandmother, rest in peace, that died of diabetes and cancer, even from inside a prison, I was sharing information. I was learning everything that I could. And as I began to feel better, I began to think better. So, and that's what made me say, okay, this is what I want to do. And I felt like this was my purpose. I felt good doing it for me and for my loved ones.
And that was the next question I was going to ask you, mm-hmm. because to go from your own self-care mm-hmm. to wanting to share that self-care with everybody, not only your family, but for the community. Mm-hmm. Tell me about you getting into the healthcare industry. And I've been to your store. Mm-hmm. The little drink that I love so much is so delicious, and yes. It made me feel better when I had it as well. But tell me why you got into the industry.
Well, so shortly after, I went to OCC for nutrition. Mm-hmm. And yes, and I just started, training people, making them feel better. And I just got into the industry again just because not only did it help myself, but I realized that I was helping other people. And as I was helping other people, I realized that I wasn't just helping them get a flat stomach or, get a six-pack abs. I was helping them with their self-image. Yeah. And also I realized that I was helping them to try to handle the cause of the problem, not so much of the symptoms. When I learned, just from having mentors, holistic doctors, and, people just as knowledgeable, almost as knowledgeable as Kenny Anderson, when people was coming and my relatives was coming, like, the doctor gave me metformin. So it kind of forced me to study why I give them metformin, and I had to learn how insulin worked and everything else. And at that point, I wasn't just a trainer. I was the guy, because a lot of African Americans don't go to the doctor.
That's true.
So they was coming at me or forcing me to have to learn to figure out why they wasn't losing weight after I was training them. And that's what put the pressure on me. I'm like, oh, this lady gave me all this money and she's not losing any weight. I wonder why. And that's when I started learning insulin resistance and the cause of eating too much refined sugar, high fructose corn syrups, GMOs, saturated fats. And that's when I said, oh, it's not really so much that the cells are just rejecting the insulin, or it's not so much as that the blood sugar is high. It's your habits, it's your lifestyle, it's your environment. Let's try to fix the cause. So I felt like I became a different type of trainer, and and then I started helping people, and people started coming back and saying, hey, I'm off of high blood pressure medication. Thanks for the advice. I'm off of this, and I feel so much better. Thanks for the advice. So that did something to me. And I felt like I had a mission to keep going.
And I'm glad you brought up all these things, and especially referencing some of the dialogue we've had with my previous guest, Kenny Anderson. You know, a lot of African Americans, 2 points that he brought up was very important, which was they are unaware of what's happening to them. And then if something is filling out a place, they usually try to, kind of pray it off or go to a doctor, and when a lot of times not really understanding what's happening with their own bodies. But then there are people like me who want to know that I've learned so much from both of you today. And I really like to know if I'm really interested in changing what's happening to me physically, which has a lot to do with what's happening with me mentally. What's some of the steps? How do we begin this journey to better health?
Well, I recommend to all my members, family, and friends that first they have to do a self-evaluation. And I help them with that by giving them questions to ask, but some of them is, what's stopping you from overcoming these obstacles? If you don't get to these goals, whether it's getting off a high blood pressure medication or losing weight, how would that affect your life? If you reach these goals, how would that impact your life? So you have to do a self-evaluation and know where you are, and you have to know where you're going if you keep these habits up.
Okay. So I want to expound on that just a little bit, because I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror and I say, okay, Brenda, how are you feeling? First of all, thank you, I'm alive, but how are you feeling today? And most of the time we get up and we start our day and we're feeling okay, and if you're on a schedule like mine, you're rushing. So you go grab the first thing you can put in your body. What would you say if on a normal day, the first thing a person should do as far as diet, what's the first thing they should try to put in their bodies?
Well, I think the first thing a person should do is maybe drink water. First and foremost, I'm not a fan of fad dieting. I'm a fan of just making healthier choices and gradual change.
Okay.
So what works best for me is intermittent fasting. We're surrounded by the choice of being able to eat so frequently, and we're surrounded by all these mechanisms that arouse us to eat. I'm a fan of intermittent fasting.
Explain intermittent fasting.
Intermittent fasting, well, the way I do it is I fast for 16 hours and I eat all my meals in an 8-hour window. And according to my experience and my research, it helps keep insulin low, help with mental clarity, help with fat loss. And also it's a way, if the insulin is low, which is a storing hormone, it allows the body for it to start healing itself.
Healing itself. I like that, because, what period of time would you say if somebody started adopting these healthier ways of eating, then I'll get into exercise in a minute.
Okay.
What would be the period of time that a person could begin experiencing feeling better? Say, for instance, you start eating the proper things at the proper time and in the proper amount. Would this be something that would be gradual over time, or would you start feeling the effects of eating correctly almost instantly?
Well, it all depends on where you are. The body, we want to try to get the body in, homeostasis. We want to try to get the body just working so that you can live your life the way that you live your life. So I would suggest that again, gradual change. You should start feeling better when you start making these small changes. I tell all my members to start taking notes. So for example, if you're used to eating breakfast all the time, then instead of not eating for 8 hours from the time you wake up, you may want to try 2, 3, or 4 and start pushing your meals up a little bit more, especially if you're not pregnant or you're not a growing kid. You know, this may not be for everyone, but if it's something that you want to try to do, simply try to skip breakfast, especially if you're the person that's snacking all the time and eating carbs all the time. Then most likely your body is rejecting the insulin because of the frequent eating. So with me, I've been intermittent fasting for 3 years, and I remember after the first 3 months, I started feeling better, me personally.
Now, see, that's very encouraging for those of us who are sedentary in our ways, and that's what I'm leading in the last part of my show. You know, I applaud you for having Anytime Fitness.
Thank you.
Tell me, how important is fitness to all of this?
Fitness is very important. Just with blood flow and the way that, the blood pressure work, physical fitness, it helps for the body to get, a dopamine hit, especially when your goals setting and movement. And we were made to move. And my way of implementing fitness, especially in Pontiac, is, as you mentioned, I started Pontiac First Juice Bar. This year, we're having our 3rd annual bike giveaway, and I'm honored for you to be a sponsor. This will be our 3rd year donating over 100 bikes to the youth just to fight childhood obesity. And also this year we'll be doing a walk, run 5K.
Yes.
So those are just some of the things that I'm doing just to fight back. I recognize what's going on. So what I try to do is I create implement programs that's not intrusive on your life, making it convenient for us to make these healthier choices. Because I think, like Kenny said, we live in an environment to where we look around, we don't see anything but liquor stores, Coney Islands, and we don't see health. If you go in a city, our surrounding neighbors, you can throw a rock anywhere and probably hit a Whole Foods, a farm, or something healthy. So I'm fighting to make sure that the people in our community can have healthier choices right there in front of their doorsteps.
Okay, and my final question to you is going to deal with a group that's very near and dear to me. What recommendations would you make for fitness for people over 60, our seniors?
Okay. Well, since I'm a male, I believe that a person should just start off slow, start off walking, and also you should join a weightlifting program, because as we age, our muscle mass decrease, and if our muscle mass decrease, then we are going to gain weight a little bit faster. So join a weightlifting program and just start off walking, drinking water, and just stay active.
Thank you, Jermaine, for coming to talk to me today and for your service to our community. And to my guests watching, thank you for tuning into this episode of Know Your Community. If you are a community member of Kegel Harbor, Orchard Lake Village, Pontiac, Sylvan Lake, or Auburn Hills, please contact me if you have any questions regarding preventative health measures, reducing racial health disparities, or just resources on how to maximize your health and wellness journey, or if my office can help you with any matter of state government. You can reach me at Brenda Carter at house.mi.gov or call me at 517-373-0475. Again, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Know Your Community.